The red dot appeared at 3:17 a.m. Stacy saw it through the doorway, a pinpoint of crimson light crawling across the twins' bedroom wall, like something alive, something hunting. Her breath stopped. Her mind tried to process what she was seeing: laser sight, targeting system, and threat. But her body was already moving, maternal instinct overriding thought. She made it 2 steps before Minjay tackled her from behind. His arm hooked around her waist with brutal efficiency, his hand clamping over her mouth as he drove her down. Not to the bed, to the floor, hard. The hardwood cracked against her shoulder and hip, the impact punching air from her lungs in a silent gasp against his palm. She tasted blood where her teeth cut the inside of her lip, copper and salt flooding her mouth. Don't move. His voice was against her ear, barely a whisper. And it wasn't the voice she'd learned over 6 months of tentative mornings and careful evenings. This wasn't the man who'd learned to make the twins laugh, who'd sat with her in comfortable silence while they watched their daughters play. This was the voice from the glass house siege. The voice from the night armed men came through windows. The glazier. Stacy's heart hammered against the floor. Through Minjay's fingers, she tried to speak, to ask, to understand why he was crushing her into the ground when their babies were in the next room. But he pressed harder, his body covering hers completely, his weight immobilizing. His other hand, she could see it from the corner of her eye, held a gun. Black metal. Matte finish. The kind of weapon that looked designed for one purpose: professional. He held it pointed toward the ceiling, finger along the trigger guard, and Stacy felt her stomach turn to ice because he held it like someone who'd been born with it in his grip, like it was an extension of his body, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Sniper. He breathed against her ear, his chest pressed against her back, his heart beating steady and slow while hers raced. Blue Victorian, 2nd floor, infrared targeting laser. They're not trying to scare us. They're acquiring targets. Stacy's eyes went wide. Through the doorway, she could see the red dot moving with deliberate, methodical precision. It tracked slowly across Mara's bed, empty. Thank God. She'd crawled into Clara's bed at midnight after a nightmare about monsters. Irony so sharp it hurt, then settled. Hovering with predatory patience on 2 small lumps under a quilt, covered in stars and moons. On her daughters. They're using you as bait, Minjay continued, his breath warm against her neck despite the coldness in his voice. The second you run to them, the second I move to protect you, they have a clear shot. Not at the girls, at me, through you if the angle requires it. Do you understand? The casual way he said it, through you if the angle requires it, made something crack in Stacy's chest. Not her ribs. Something deeper. The illusion that they'd escaped. That the 6 months of building something fragile and real had actually meant safety. She nodded against his hand, tears hot on her face, soaking into his fingers. Good. His voice dropped even lower, and there was something in it she'd never heard before. Not anger, not fear, absolute certainty. I told you I was a monster, Stacy. You said you could live with that. You said you saw me trying to change. Now you get to see why I'll never fully change. Why I can't. He lifted his hand from her mouth slowly, cautiously, ready to clamp down again if she made a sound. Stacy sucked in air silently, her throat tight, watching that red dot hover over her sleeping daughters, watching it drift incrementally left, right. The shooter adjusting for wind, for distance, for the perfect kill shot. Who? She breathed, so quietly she barely heard herself. Seo clan. The distribution network I burned in exchange for keeping the feds off our trail. Minjay's jaw was pressed against her temple, his eyes never leaving the window, tracking angles she couldn't see. I told you visibility creates targets. You and the girls are the only target that matters to them. They don't want my money or my territory. They want me to suffer first, then die. How did they? The noise I made finding you. Every helicopter, every convoy, every asset I deployed that night left traces, patterns. They've been hunting for an opening ever since. Tonight, they found it. Through the doorway, Stacy could see into the twins' room more clearly now. Could see the shape of them under the blanket. Clara's arm thrown protectively over Mara's chest, even in sleep. Mara's curly hair spread across the pillow like a dark halo, individual coils catching the moonlight from the window. 3 years old. They were 3 years old and someone had a rifle scope painting their sleeping faces with a laser designed to help bullets find flesh. Glass shattered downstairs. Not their window, not the twins' room. Somewhere below. Kitchen, maybe. Or the back door near the mudroom. Minjay moved. He was off her in a heartbeat, gun up, body between her and the bedroom door, moving with a speed and precision that spoke of training she'd never fully acknowledged. "Panic room," he said, his voice command sharp. "Now, get the girls. Stay below window sightlines. Don't turn on lights. Go." Stacy's body unlocked. She actually crawled on her hands and knees, like an animal across the hardwood floor she'd refinished herself 6 months ago. The floor where they'd played with the twins, where she'd believed they were building something safe into the twins' room. The red dot was gone from the wall, which meant the shooter had moved position or, no time to think. She reached the bed and clamped her hand over Mara's mouth before shaking her awake. Mara's eyes flew open, dark and huge in the dimness, a scream building in her throat, her small body going rigid with terror. "Shh, baby, shh," Stacy whispered, pulling her close, feeling her daughter's heart beating hummingbird fast against her palm. "We're playing the quiet game, remember? Like Daddy taught you?" Mara nodded against her hand, and Stacy felt her heart shatter because yes, Minjay had taught them this, had drilled them on emergency protocols she'd thought were paranoid, had made it a game, the quiet game, the don't make a sound game, because he'd known, had always known, that this day would come, that his past would find them, that safety was an illusion they were borrowing on credit that would eventually come due. Clara woke next, groggy and confused, her small face scrunching up in that way that meant tears were coming. Stacy grabbed her too, one child in each arm now, both of them trembling, both of them blessedly, miraculously silent, because they were good girls, smart girls. And they knew when Mama's voice sounded like that, when her hands shook like this, you didn't ask questions, you just held on. Footsteps downstairs. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on hardwood that echoed up through the house like a countdown. Minjay appeared in the doorway, backlit by the hallway's emergency lighting. When had he activated emergency lighting? How long had he been planning for this? And he'd changed. No, not changed. Transformed. He'd strapped on a tactical vest over his bare chest, black Kevlar with pockets and pouches, professional military-grade protection, and he held the gun like it was part of his hand, fingers still along the guard, muzzle pointed safely toward the ceiling but ready to drop and fire in a fraction of a second. This wasn't her partner. This was the Glazier, the ghost who'd built an empire in shadows. "Panic room," he repeated, scanning the hallway behind him with systematic precision, checking angles, assessing threats. "Now." Stacy stood on shaking legs, a twin on each hip, their small arms wrapped around her neck, their faces buried in her shoulders, their breath fast and frightened against her skin. "How many?" she asked, because she needed to know, needed to understand the scope of what was coming for them. Minjay's expression was ice, pure, calculated ice. "Enough." He moved into the hallway first, and Stacy followed, her bare feet silent on the wood floor she'd walked 1,000 times in daylight, in safety, in the delusion that they'd escaped his past. Her daughter's heartbeats thundered against her chest, their small bodies warm and alive, and so terribly, terribly fragile. Behind them, through the bedroom window, the red dot reappeared on the wall. But by then, they were already gone, disappearing into a darkness Minjay had prepared for, into an escape he'd built while she'd been pretending they were normal. The panic room wasn't a room at all. It was a tunnel. Minjay had pressed his hand flat against the wall panel at the hallway's end, his palm covering what looked like ordinary paint, but must have been a biometric scanner because the wall clicked, then slid open with a hydraulic whisper that spoke of expensive engineering and careful preparation. Behind the panel, stairs descending into darkness, reinforced steel walls, LED strips along the floor casting everything in cold white light. Stacy had lived in this house for 6 months and never known this existed. The realization made her skin crawl. How many other secrets had Minjay built into their life? How many escape routes and contingencies and backup plans had he woven into the foundation while she'd been choosing paint colors and planting gardens? The tunnel smelled like recycled air and concrete, pressurized. The LED strips created pools of light every few feet, and between them, shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. Minjay moved ahead with the twins while Stacy followed, her bare feet silent on metal grating that hummed with some kind of ventilation system she couldn't see but could feel, a vibration that traveled up through her bones. Behind them, the house was being torn apart. She could hear it even through what must be 3 feet of reinforced concrete and steel. The crash of furniture overturned, glass shattering in multiple rooms simultaneously, boots on hardwood floors above their heads, moving in coordinated patterns. Professional, organized. This wasn't a random attack. This was a tactical breach by people who knew what they were doing. "Stop," Stacy said, the word echoing strangely in the tunnel's acoustics. Minjay kept walking, his pace measured. Clara held securely in his left arm, while his right hand stayed near, though not on the gun holstered at his hip now. "Minjay, stop." He paused but didn't turn around. Just stood there in the tunnel, his shoulders tight, his breath controlled, waiting. "We don't have time for this," he said quietly. "Time for what? An explanation? You just dragged us out of our house at gunpoint. Our house is compromised." He turned then, and the look on his face made her step back despite herself. Not anger, worse, nothing. Just cold calculation and the weight of decisions she couldn't see, variables she didn't understand. A chess game played on a board that existed in dimensions she couldn't access. "It has been for 72 hours. I've been running counter-surveillance since Tuesday. Tonight they made their move. We go now or we die. Pick one. You knew." Stacy's hands curled into fists at her sides. "You knew for 3 days someone was watching and you didn't tell me?" "Tell you what?" Minjay shifted Clara more securely against his chest, and even in this moment, even in crisis, his touch with her was gentle. "That the Seo clan has been conducting reconnaissance? That they've mapped our routines down to the minute? That they know what time the girls eat breakfast, and which park we take them to on Thursdays, and which grocery store you prefer, and what route you take to get there?" The specificity of it hit her like a physical blow. "Yes, that's exactly what you tell me. So you could do what, Stacy? Panic? Second-guess every security decision I've made? Question whether my measures are sufficient while men with assault rifles and night vision close in on our children?" He took a step toward her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes then. Not cruelty. Exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been carrying impossible weight alone. "I made noise finding you. I broke every rule of operational security. I exposed myself to save you, and now the bill has come due. This," he gestured to the tunnel, to the situation, to all of it. "This is what it costs to love people in my world." Mara whimpered against Stacy's shoulder, her small voice muffled. "Mama scared." "I'm not scared, baby." Stacy smoothed her daughter's curls with shaking hands, her eyes locked on Minjay. "I'm angry. Be angry later." Minjay turned and kept walking, his footsteps echoing ahead. "Right now, be quiet and stay close and trust that I know what I'm doing." The tunnel ended 50 yards later at a steel door. Heavy, the kind you'd find on a bank vault. Minjay punched in a code on a digital keypad, 12 digits. Stacy counted without meaning to, her architect's mind cataloging details even in crisis. 08-1508-152022. The twins' birthday twice, August 15th, then their birth year. He was using dates any halfway decent hacker could guess, which meant either he was sentimental to the point of stupidity, or he'd built in so many other security layers that the code itself was almost irrelevant. The door opened with a pneumatic hiss, air pressure equalizing. Beyond it, a bunker, not a basement, not a storage room, a facility. Gray concrete walls reinforced with steel. Rows of monitors showing security feeds from cameras Stacy didn't recognize, angles she'd never seen, views of their house and street and neighborhood from positions that suggested hidden cameras everywhere. A central table with tactical gear laid out with military precision weapons she didn't recognize, communication equipment, maps with routes marked in red, and in the corner, behind a glass partition that looked soundproof, 2 small beds with fresh white linens and a shelf of toys that looked recently purchased. He'd planned this, down to toys for traumatized children. "How long?" Stacy asked quietly, setting Mara down gently, watching her daughter run to Clara, who Minjay was placing on one of the beds. "How long what? How long have you been preparing this bunker?" Minjay crossed to the monitors, his fingers already moving across keyboards with practice speed, pulling up feeds, checking systems, scanning for threats. "Since the day you agreed to stay, since the day you said yes to joint custody and building something together." The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading out in implications Stacy didn't want to examine. "You knew this would happen. I knew it was possible, probable even." He didn't look at her, just kept working the keyboards, his eyes scanning data feeds, threat assessments, tactical overlays. "I'm a ghost, Stacy. Ghosts don't get to have families. They don't get to sit on porch steps watching their daughters build castles from sticks and imagination. They don't get to pretend the past doesn't exist just because they want it to. But you, his hands paused on the keys, just for a moment, you made me want to try anyway. So I built contingencies, escape routes, safe houses, this. On the screens, Stacy could see their house, or what was left of it. Men in tactical gear moving through rooms with systematic efficiency, weapons raised, clearing corners, searching, 6 men visible across different camera angles, maybe more in blind spots. They're tearing it apart, she whispered. Let them. Minjay still didn't look away from the screens. There's nothing there that matters. No files, no evidence, no information. I keep everything important either in my head or in places like this. They'll find a house, that's all. Our home was never safe. He finally turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was profound, ancient, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. I'm sorry. I know you wanted to believe in the foundation we were building. I wanted to believe it too. But foundations crack, Stacy. Especially foundations built on top of fault lines. And the world I came from doesn't forgive. It just waits. It watches. And when you finally let your guard down, it strikes. Above them, something boomed. Distant, but felt through the concrete. A vibration that traveled through the floor. The bunker lights flickered once, twice, then held. They're moving faster than I expected. Minjay said, almost to himself, his tactical mind processing implications Stacy couldn't see. Which means they had better intelligence than I thought. Which means the monitors went dark. All of them. Simultaneously. Not one by one. All at once. In the sudden silence, broken only by the hum of backup systems kicking in, Clara started to cry. The backup generators kicked in after 5 seconds of pure darkness that felt like an eternity. Emergency lighting painted everything in red, turning the bunker into something from a nightmare. All harsh shadows and blood-colored illumination. Stacy had both twins pressed against her chest before she'd consciously decided to move, maternal instinct overriding thought. Their small hands fisted in her shirt, their breathing fast and scared, their hearts beating against her like trapped birds. Across the bunker, Minjay stood perfectly still at the dead monitors, his jaw tight, his hands curled into fists at his sides. What does that mean? Stacy asked, her voice steadier than she felt. It means they cut the external feeds. His voice was too calm, the kind of calm that came from practice, from having been in situations like this before. Which means they have someone with technical expertise. Which means they know about the bunker's existence and location. Which means he stopped, turned, looked at her with an expression she couldn't read, something between fury and despair. It means I underestimated them. I thought we had more time. Something in Stacy snapped. 6 months of swallowing fear, of pretending to trust, of building a life on top of quicksand while pretending it was bedrock. All of it came pouring out in a rush of words she couldn't stop. You underestimated them? She stood, settling the twins on the small beds behind the glass partition, pointing to the toys with hands that shook. Play, babies. Mama needs to talk to Daddy. We'll be right here, right where you can see us. Mara's bottom lip trembled, her dark eyes too, knowing, too old. Mama mad? Not at you, sweet girl. Never at you. Stacy kissed her forehead, then Clara's, then closed the partition door soundproof. She realized as it sealed with a soft hiss. Another thing Minjay had planned for. Another contingency for trauma he'd anticipated their daughters might witness. She turned on him. You dragged us into this, she said, her voice low and sharp, years of suppressed rage finding its voice. Your past, your enemies, your violence, your choices, and now you're telling me you underestimated the people trying to kill us? Stacy. No. She crossed the space between them, her finger jabbing at his chest, at the Kevlar vest he still wore, at the armor he wrapped himself in while their daughters cowered behind glass. You don't get to Stacy me. I kept those girls safe for 2 years on my own. 2 years of struggling and scraping by, and making sure they had food and clothes and stability despite having nothing. And you have the audacity to act like I should be grateful you swooped in and dragged us into a war we never asked for because you couldn't let go. Grateful? Minjay's laugh was bitter, broken. You think I want gratitude? I think you want control. I think you want to play savior and hero and protector, and have me fall at your feet, because the big bad monster rescued the helpless single mother from the consequences of his own filthy lifestyle. Stop. from the violence and death that follows you like a shadow. I said stop. His voice cracked like a whip, and Stacy's words died in her throat. Not because she was afraid, but because something in his face had shifted, gone brittle, like glass under too much pressure, about to shatter. You want to know what this cost? Really know? You want the accounting? He pulled out his phone with movements that were just slightly too controlled, the kind of control that suggested violence barely restrained. Pulled up a banking app, turned the screen to her. $400 million, he said quietly, each word precise. Seized assets, frozen accounts, properties confiscated under RICO statutes. That's what I lost in the last 24 hours keeping law enforcement focused on me instead of you, burning my own empire to keep the attention away from our daughters. Stacy stared at the numbers, at the accounts showing zero, at the seizure notices, at the legal documents scrolling past. And here, he swiped to another screen. A news article. 3 faces. Korean men she didn't recognize. Cho's tactical team. They died 12 hours ago covering our extraction from the house. The one you're angry we had to leave. They died holding a perimeter so we could reach this bunker. Cho's widow called me 3 hours ago, wanting to know if her husband's death meant anything. If keeping you safe was worth his life. I told her yes. I lied. The air left Stacy's lungs. Those men had names, faces, families, and they died so she could run. So yes, Stacy, my filthy lifestyle, my violent past, my consequences. Minjay pocketed the phone, and when he looked at her, his eyes were cold, empty, the glazier fully present now. But those consequences don't just belong to me anymore. They belong to you, to Mara, to Clara, because you chose to stay. You chose this life. You chose me. I chose you, Stacy whispered, her throat tight. Not this, not war, not people dying. They're the same thing. He moved past her toward the monitors, already working on manual reboots, fingers flying across keyboards with practiced efficiency. They've always been the same thing. You just didn't want to see it. You wanted to believe I could be domesticated, reformed, that love could make me into something safe. You let me believe that, because I wanted to believe it too. He slammed his hand on the table, and Stacy flinched despite herself. I wanted to be the man you saw when you looked at me. The man who could build a garden with his daughters and sit on porch steps watching the sunset and be normal. But that man was always a lie. An illusion we were both pretending was real. Behind the glass, Mara was showing Clara a stuffed rabbit, her small voice narrating a story Stacy couldn't hear through the soundproofing. Safe, for now, because men had died to make it so. Stacy felt something break inside her. What do we do now? We survive. Minjay didn't turn around. Your pride is a luxury we can no longer afford, Stacy. Be a mother or be a victim. Pick one, because those are your only options now. The words hit like ice water. That's not fair. Fair? He laughed, and it sounded like something dying. Nothing about this is fair, but it's real. And real doesn't care about your feelings or mine or what we wish things could be. It just is. So you can keep being angry at me for dragging you into my world, or you can accept that you're in it now and start acting like you want to survive it. Your choice. Stacy opened her mouth to argue, to fight, to push back against the brutality of what he was saying, against the elimination of every option except the ones he was giving her. But then she looked at her daughters, at their small faces pressed against glass, watching her, waiting for her to tell them everything would be okay. She closed her mouth. Minjay was right. She hated that he was right, but he was. The wall opened 6 hours later. Not the door they'd come through. A different section of concrete that slid aside with the whisper of hydraulics so smooth Stacy barely heard it, revealing a tunnel lit with the same cold LED strips as before. She'd been sitting with the twins, reading them a story about a brave little mouse who ventured into a scary forest when the sound made her freeze mid-sentence. Minjay was on his feet instantly, gun drawn from the holster at his hip, body automatically positioning between them and the opening. A figure stepped through. Small, elegant, a woman in her 60s wearing a tailored black suit that probably cost more than Stacy had earned in a year when she was working. Her hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, without a single strand out of place, despite having traveled through underground tunnels. Her makeup was subtle and flawless, her jewelry understated but unmistakably expensive. And when she looked at Minjay, her expression was carved from ice, beautiful and merciless, and utterly without warmth. Mother? Minjay said in Korean, the word sounding like both greeting and accusation. The woman responded in the same language, rapid and sharp, her tone brooking no argument. The conversation went back and forth for maybe 30 seconds, and Stacy didn't need to speak Korean to understand the dynamic. This was a woman used to being obeyed. And Minjay, despite everything, despite being a man who commanded criminal empires and made people disappear, was responding to her like a child being scolded. Minjay's jaw tightened visibly. He holstered the gun with controlled precision. English, please, for Stacy's benefit. Why? The woman's English was perfect, barely accented, the kind of English learned at expensive international schools and refined through decades of high society. She is not family, she is a temporary complication. The words landed like a slap, casual and dismissive and absolute. Mother, this is Stacy Woods, the twins' mother. Stacy, this is Lee Sun-young, my mother. Lee Sun-young's eyes flicked to Stacy for less than a second, a dismissive assessment that found her wanting before she turned away entirely, walking past both of them with the kind of confidence that suggested she owned every space she entered. She moved directly to the glass partition, where Mara and Clara sat watching with wide eyes. Maraya, she said, her voice suddenly soft, gentle. Nothing like the ice she'd used with Minjay and Stacy. Clara, come to Halmoni, come to grandmother. The twins looked at their mother, uncertain, frightened by the stranger who spoke in a language they didn't understand. Stacy nodded, trying to project calm she didn't feel, and they climbed off the bed slowly, approaching the glass with the caution of small animals assessing a potential threat. Lee Sun-young crouched perfect posture, immaculate suit somehow not wrinkling, even as she bent and studied them through the barrier with an intensity that made Stacy's skin crawl. She spoke to them in Korean, her voice gentle, warm, everything it hadn't been moments before, asking questions they couldn't answer, making observations they couldn't understand. They don't speak Korean, Stacy said, stepping forward, unable to stop herself despite knowing it might be strategic suicide. Lee Sun-young's eyes cut to her again, this time holding contact for several seconds, sharp, assessing, calculating value and threat in the space of a heartbeat. Then they will learn. They are Lee blood. They carry my husband's name, my son's heritage. They must know their language, their culture, their birthright, their Woods, Stacy said quietly, firmly. Their legal names are Woods. They're American children. For now. The woman stood, turning her full attention to Minjay, and Stacy suddenly felt like she'd become invisible, irrelevant, a piece of furniture to be worked around. We need to talk, privately. Anything you say to me can be said in front of Stacy. Can it? Lee Sun-young smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes, didn't soften the calculation there. Very well. The family council has convened an emergency session. They have agreed to your terms. The merger with the Park shipping dynasty will proceed as planned. You will marry Park Ji-won in 3 months. Her family's resources will provide the protection you need for your situation. Stacy's world tilted, the floor seeming to shift under her feet. Marry? She heard herself say, the word barely audible. Lee Sun-young looked at her the way one might look at a servant who'd spoken out of turn. Did he not tell you? The price of our family's protection is alliance through marriage. Minjay's personal preferences are irrelevant to the family's strategic needs. Park Ji-won is a suitable match. Educated, connected, legitimate. She will provide the social cover Minjay needs to rebuild after his recent difficulties. Mother Minjay's voice was a warning, low and dangerous. But Lee Sun-young spoke over him, as if he hadn't made a sound. The children will be raised properly, of course. Korean tutors starting immediately. Private schools with the appropriate connections. They will want for nothing. Their illegitimate birth will be overlooked, given the circumstances. And you, she addressed Stacy directly now, her tone making it clear this was a business transaction, not a family discussion, will be compensated generously for your service as their biological mother. The family takes care of its obligations, Miss Woods, even the uncomfortable ones. Service? Stacy's voice was ice despite the heat rising in her chest. I'm their mother, not a surrogate, not a service provider. Their mother. Legally, you are nothing. Lee Sun-young pulled a document from her jacket with the casual efficiency of someone who'd come prepared for this exact conversation. No marriage certificate. No paternity claim filed on record. Minjay's name appears nowhere on their birth certificates. He could petition for custody tomorrow based on DNA evidence, and you would have no legal standing whatsoever. The courts would see a wealthy, connected family versus a single mother with no resources. You know how that would end. He wouldn't he? The woman's smile was cruel now, sharp. Ask yourself, Miss Woods, what do you really know about my son? What he's capable of when he wants something? What he's willing to do to people who stand between him and his objectives? Stacy looked at Minjay. His face was stone, unreadable, and in that moment she didn't know if he was furious at his mother or if this had been his plan all along. Get out, Minjay said quietly, the words barely above a whisper but carrying absolute authority. I'm trying to help you. You're trying to control me, like you always have. Like you've tried to control every aspect of my life since I was old enough to understand what the family business really meant. His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was something underneath it now. Something old and wounded and furious. Get out of my bunker, mother. Now. Lee Sun-young's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Calculation recalibrating. 3 months, Minjay. The wedding is set. The contracts are signed. You gave your word to the family council. Your word is binding. She walked back through the tunnel without another glance at Stacy, without acknowledging the twins, her heels clicking on concrete until she disappeared into darkness and the wall slid shut behind her. When the seal was complete, the silence in the bunker was deafening. Is it true? Stacy asked, her voice surprisingly steady. The marriage? The contracts? Your word? It's complicated. Is it true? Minjay's hands curled into fists at his sides, knuckles going white. Yes, the word hung between them like a blade. How long have you known? The arrangement was made 2 months ago, before you found the surveillance room. Before, he stopped, before I knew if we had a future or not. And you didn't think to mention it? I was trying to find a way out. A loophole. Something. He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was real, raw. The family has a claim on me, Stacy. My duty to them predates you, predates the twins. It's the price of the protection they provide, the resources they command. I can't just walk away, but you can marry someone else while telling me we're building a future together? I never lied about building a future. I just didn't tell you all the constraints on what that future could look like. That's the same thing as lying. I know. Behind the glass, the twins were playing with blocks, building towers and knocking them down, oblivious to their world fracturing around them. Stacy looked at them, looked at Minjay, looked at the walls of the bunker that was supposed to keep them safe but felt more like a tomb with every passing minute. I need some time, she said. Alone, with the girls. Minjay nodded, already moving toward the tunnel. I'll be in the surveillance room if you need anything. He left, and Stacy sank to the floor, her back against the wall, her hands shaking. 3 months. He had 3 months before he married someone else. Before their fragile attempt at building something real became legally impossible. 3 months to figure out how to survive in a world where nothing was what it seemed. Stacy couldn't sleep. The twins were curled together in one of the small beds, Clara's arm thrown protectively over Mara, their breathing soft and even despite everything, despite the red laser dots and the men with guns and the underground bunker that smelled like recycled air and fear. Children adapted. It was terrifying how quickly they adapted to nightmare and called it normal. Minjay had disappeared into some other section of the bunker hours ago, after she'd stopped speaking to him entirely, after the cold silence between them had grown so heavy it felt like another person in the room. The betrayal of the arranged marriage sat in her chest like a stone, weighing down every breath. He'd been planning to marry someone else, while she'd been choosing to stay, while they'd been building something fragile and real, or what she'd thought was real. While she'd been letting herself believe that maybe they could survive each other. Lies by omission were still lies. She stood, paced the small space. The bunker was tight, claustrophobic, but there were doors she hadn't explored, sections she hadn't seen. Minjay had said to stay in the main area, but Minjay had also lied about everything else, so his authority on what she should and shouldn't do felt rather compromised at the moment. She tried the first door, locked. Digital keypad requiring a code she didn't have. Second door. Same. She was turning away from the third door when she heard Minjay's voice through it, faint but audible. On a call, speaking Korean, the tone strained and angry. She hadn't known he was in there. She stepped back into shadow as the door opened. Minjay walked out, phone pressed to his ear, his attention entirely on the conversation, not seeing her standing in the darkness against the wall. His fingers moved across the keypad. She watched from an angle, her architect's mind cataloging spatial relationships, the pattern of his movements. 081508152022. The same code from the main door. The same code he'd probably use for everything because despite being a criminal mastermind, he was still human, still prone to the same lazy shortcuts everyone used. Birthday codes, easy to remember, impossible to forget, critically insecure if anyone knew the dates. The door opened, and Minjay disappeared inside, still arguing in Korean, his voice rising with frustration. Stacy waited in the shadow, counted to 60 in her head, using the old technique from college when she'd needed to time concrete curing. Then she moved to the door and input the sequence. 0815, 0815, 2022. The keypad blinked green. The lock disengaged with a soft click. It opened. Motion sensors triggered overhead lights automatically, white and harsh and revealing. Banks of monitors covering one entire wall, more screens than she'd seen in the main command center. Filing cabinets along another wall, organized with labels she could read even from the doorway. Surveillance, tracking, financial, contingencies. A desk with 3 computers, all sleeping but humming with latent power. Hard drives processing even in standby mode. The room was empty. Minjay must have left through a different exit. Stacy was alone with his secrets. She moved to the monitors, her hand trembling as she touched a mouse. The screens woke immediately, password protection apparently disabled or set to recognize any user input in this space. Security feeds. Dozens of them. Some she recognized from the main command center. The Victorian house they'd just fled, now swarming with tactical teams. Others she didn't recognize. Street corners in their neighborhood, angles of their house she'd never seen, views from positions that suggested hidden cameras everywhere. Her throat tightened. She clicked through folders on the desktop, her fingers moving almost of their own accord, following a compulsion she didn't want to name. Files. So many files. Organized by date, labeled with clinical precision. She opened one at random. Her finger hovering over the mouse like touching it would make all of this real in a way she couldn't take back. Photos. The park. Mara on the swings. Her face turned toward the camera with pure joy, hair flying wild in the wind, her mouth open in a laugh Stacy could almost hear. Clara at the water fountain, soaked and laughing, her shirt plastered to her small body, her shoes squelching, Stacy herself in the background, pushing them both on the merry-go-round, her face visible in profile, smiling despite the exhaustion she remembered feeling that day. Date stamp in the corner of each photo. 7 months ago. Before she collapsed. Before the twins called the red button phone. Before Minjay found them. Before, her stomach dropped sickeningly. She opened another file with shaking hands. More photos. The twins outside their cottage, walking down the street holding her hands, their small feet in the matching rain boots she'd bought at a thrift store. Stacy visible in most frames. Always in motion. Always watching them. Always vigilant. Date stamp. 8 months ago. Another file. Security camera footage. Grainy but clear enough. Stacy at a grocery store with the girls in the cart. They were in the cereal aisle. Mara was reaching for Lucky Charms and Stacy was shaking her head, pointing at the cheaper store brand instead. And Mara's face was falling with that particular disappointment of childhood. Stacy remembered that day. Remembered counting pennies in her head. Remembered the shame of telling her daughter no, because $5 mattered. Because $5 was the difference between eating and not eating at the end of the month. Date stamp. 9 months ago. No, Stacy whispered to the empty room, but the proof was everywhere. Surveillance logs in spreadsheets showing dates and times and locations. Tracking reports with maps of her neighborhood. Routes highlighted in red, her routes, her patterns. Every trip to the store and the park, and the library documented with timestamps and notes. All of it dated before the collapse. All of it proving that Minjay had known exactly where she was for months before the twins called him. You weren't supposed to find this room. Stacy spun so fast she nearly fell. Minjay stood in a doorway she hadn't seen. A second entrance concealed in what had looked like a continuation of the wall. His expression was unreadable, carefully blank, but his hands were curled into fists at his sides. You were watching us, she said. Her voice sounded distant, hollow, like it was coming from somewhere outside her body. For months, you knew where we were. You knew everything. Yes, the collapse, the phone call, the red button. It was all. No. He stepped into the room properly, and she saw the exhaustion in him now, bone deep and ancient. The collapse was real, Stacy. I didn't orchestrate your illness. I didn't cause your anemia or your syncope or your body failing from the stress of doing everything alone. That was real. The call was real. I just waited. Waited for what? For you to need me. His voice was quiet, factual, not apologetic, not ashamed, just stating truth. I found you 6 months before the twins called. 6 months of watching you struggle and scrape and barely survive, and I could have ended it at any moment. Could have used the courts, my money, my lawyers, could have had DNA tests done and filed for custody, and had the girls in my arms within a week. Stacy's legs felt weak. She leaned against the desk, her hands gripping the edge, needing something solid because the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. But I wanted to see if you could survive. Minjay continued, moving closer with slow, careful steps like approaching a frightened animal. If you could build a life for them, if you were strong enough to protect them without me. Because if you were, if you could do it alone, then maybe, his voice cracked, just slightly, maybe I was wrong. Maybe you didn't need me. Maybe they didn't need me. Maybe the best thing I could do for all of you was stay in the shadows and watch. Make sure you were safe from a distance. Be a ghost in truth, not just in name. So you watched us like prisoners. I watched you like a man watching the only thing in the world that mattered, knowing he couldn't have it, knowing he'd destroyed any right to it, but unable to look away. His eyes were on hers now, and there was something devastating in them. And then you collapsed. And my daughters, our daughters, called me, terrified, while their mother was dying on the floor. And I realized I couldn't wait anymore. Couldn't stand on the sidelines conducting surveillance and telling myself it was protection. I had to choose. Watch you die from a distance, or intervene knowing it would pull you back into my orbit forever. You're insane, Stacy breathed. I know. You stalked us. For months, you watched us struggle. Yes, you could have helped, could have sent money anonymously, could have... I did. His voice hardened. Every anonymous donation to that food bank you used? Me. Every time your landlord mysteriously didn't raise rent when everyone else's went up? Me. That scholarship that covered the twins' preschool fees that you thought was need-based? Me. I couldn't let you drown completely, Stacy. But I also couldn't reveal myself until I was sure you'd choose to stay. The casual admission made her stomach turn. You manipulated everything. I responded to the situation you created when you ran. When you decided I wasn't worth trusting. When you chose to raise my children in poverty and isolation because your pride was more important than their security or my right to know them. The words cut deep because they weren't entirely wrong. I did what I had to do, Stacy said, but the conviction had leaked out of her voice. So did I. Minjay looked at her, and his eyes were empty now, the glazier fully present. The difference is, I'm not pretending it was noble. I'm not claiming moral high ground. I'm telling you what I am. A monster who loves possessively and watches obsessively and can't let go of the only thing that's ever mattered. You knew that when you chose to stay. You just didn't know the full extent of it. Now you do. Behind them, the monitors cycled through feeds, an endless parade of surveillance, of boundaries violated, of privacy destroyed in the name of protection that looked remarkably like control. Stacy looked at him. At this man who'd turned stalking into strategy and called it love. How long until you tell me the next secret? She asked quietly. I don't know. I'm running out of them. That's not reassuring. It's honest. That's all I have left to give you. And somehow, terribly, that almost made it worse. They stood in the surveillance room, 6 feet of air between them that felt like miles. The evidence of his obsession glowed on screens all around them, an electronic confession that couldn't be unsaid. You could have just approached me, Stacy said, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat. After you found us, you could have knocked on the door, introduced yourself to your daughters, been honest. You would have run. Minjay's voice was flat, certain. The second you saw me at your door, you would have grabbed the twins and disappeared. New city, new name, gone. You don't know that. I know you. He gestured to the screens, to the months of surveillance data. Better than you know yourself. 6 months of watching, Stacy. I know your patterns, your fears. I know you check the locks 3 times before bed because you're terrified someone will break in. I know you wake up at 2 a.m. to check their breathing because you're afraid of SIDS even though they're 3 years old. I know you cry in the shower so the twins won't hear you. I know you skip meals so they can eat. I know, stop, that you loved me, that you still love me, that you hate yourself for it because you think love makes you weak. You're delusional. Am I? He moved closer, and she forced herself not to step back. Then why did you stay? After the glass house, after the siege, after seeing what I really am, why agree to joint custody? Why build a life with me when you could have taken the twins and disappeared again? For their stability, for yourself. His voice dropped lower, intimate and cruel, because some part of you felt safer knowing I was watching. Knowing that if anything happened, if someone threatened you, if you got sick, if the world became too much, I'd come. You wanted a guard dog you could pretend wasn't on a leash you were holding. The words hit like a slap because they were partly, terribly true. She had felt safer knowing he had resources, had felt relief when his money meant the twins could have things she couldn't afford alone, had let herself lean into the security he provided while telling herself she was choosing it freely. I wanted to see if you could survive without me, Minjay continued, his eyes never leaving hers. If you were strong enough. If I'd been wrong about you needing me. And you know what I learned? You couldn't. You collapsed. Your body gave out from the stress of doing everything alone. But here's what else I learned. His voice cracked, just barely. I can't survive without you either. Those 6 months watching from shadows were the loneliest of my life. I had everything I thought I wanted. Freedom, power, control. And none of it meant anything without you and the girls. That's not love, Stacy whispered. That's obsession. I know, but it's all I have. It's all I am. He was close enough now that she could see the exhaustion etched in his face, the shadows under his eyes. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to understand. I'm just telling you the truth. I found you. I watched you. I waited for my chance to pull you back into my orbit, because I'm selfish and possessive and I don't know how to love people without consuming them. Alarms shattered the moment. Not the emergency klaxons from before. Different. Sharper. More urgent. Minjay's head snapped toward the door. No, not here. They can't have tracked. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his face went white. They're in the secondary tunnel. The one my mother used. She gave them the access codes. What? Move. Now. He was already pulling her toward the door, his hand tight on her wrist. Grab the twins. We have 30 seconds before they breach. Stacy ran. Through the surveillance room, into the main bunker, her bare feet slapping concrete. The twins were awake now, crying, frightened by the alarms. She grabbed them both, one in each arm, their small bodies trembling. Mama, scared. Mara's voice was high, panicked. I know, baby. Hold on tight. Minjay was at the monitors, his fingers flying across keyboards. There's a service tunnel, behind the partition. It leads to the industrial district. We can lose them in the warehouses. What about the FBI? The feds looking for us? Better them than what's coming through that door. He pulled a hidden release and the glass partition slid aside, revealing another tunnel entrance. Go. I'll be right behind you. Minjay, go. Stacy ran into the darkness, the twins crying against her shoulders. Behind her, she heard gunfire, saw muzzle flashes reflected off concrete walls. Then Minjay was beside her, blood on his shirt, herding them forward through the tunnel. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't look back. Above them, the bunker was being torn apart. The service tunnel opened into a maintenance basement beneath a textile factory. Empty at night, dark except for emergency lighting. Minjay moved them quickly through a maze of industrial equipment and storage containers until they reached a small office space. He pulled out a laptop from a hidden compartment. Satellite connection. Encrypted. Give me 2 minutes to assess the situation. The twins were crying softly, exhausted and confused. Stacy held them close, whispering reassurances she didn't believe. Minjay's fingers flew across the keyboard. Then he stopped, went very still. What? Stacy asked. The FBI. He turned the screen toward her. They've found us somehow. They're offering you a deal. On the screen, an official communication. FBI header. Special Agent Sarah Chen, RICO Task Force. Miss Woods, we know you and your children are with Lee Minjay. We can help you. Immunity, in exchange for testimony. Your daughters will be placed in protective custody. You don't have to be a victim of his crimes. They think you're a hostage, Minjay said quietly. Aren't I? The words came out before Stacy could stop them. His face went carefully blank. You can take the deal. I won't stop you, won't you? No. He stood, moving away from the computer. I've never kept someone who wanted to leave. Not really. You ran before and I let you go. Watched from a distance, but I let you go. If you want to run again, his voice caught. Run. Why now? Why are the feds here now? Minjay pulled up security footage. A phone call, intercepted and recorded. Lee Sun-young's voice, clear and cold. The bunker coordinates are 47.6062 degrees north, 122.331 degrees west. He has the children and the mother. Tell your Rico team this is their chance. He's cornered. Your mother. She wants me in federal custody. If I'm arrested, she petitions for guardianship of the twins. She gets what she wants. Legitimate heirs without their inconvenient criminal father. And you, he looked at her. You become an obstacle she can remove legally through custody proceedings. She sold you out. She made a strategic move. I should have seen it coming. His laugh was bitter. I was so focused on the Seo clan and external threats. I didn't think about the knife aimed at my back from inside my own family. On screen, the FBI message blinked, waiting for a response. What are you going to do? Stacy asked. I'm giving you a choice. Minjay turned to face her fully. You can take their deal, walk away, testify against me, and I spend the next 20 years in prison. The twins grow up in witness protection with clean names, no connection to my world, no target on their backs. They'll be safe. And you? I'll be gone, but they'll be safe. Isn't that what matters? What's the other choice? You stay. We fight together. And maybe we lose everything anyway. Maybe the feds take me. Maybe my mother wins. Maybe the Seo clan finds us. But at least... His voice broke slightly. At least I won't spend the rest of my life wondering if you chose to leave, or if you were just never given the choice. Mara called out softly. Mama? Scared. I know, baby. Stacy looked at the message. At the promise of freedom, of safety, of escape from a man who loved like a black hole, consuming everything. Then at Minjay, at the exhaustion in his face, the resignation, the way he stood, like he was already preparing to watch her walk away again. She moved to the desk, found a piece of paper, wrote quickly, backup location if compromised, 47.7128 degrees north, 122.4598 degrees west, access code 0815-0815, use only if absolutely necessary. She folded it, put it in her pocket. I need time to think, she said. An hour, alone with the girls. Something flickered in Minjay's eyes. Of course, I'll be checking the perimeter. He left. Stacy waited until his footsteps faded. Then she moved to the computer, started deleting systematically. GPS coordinates, location data, every backup server, every cloud sync, every redundant file, 20 minutes of methodical destruction. If the feds couldn't find Minjay on their systems, they couldn't coordinate a raid. They'd have to rely solely on his mother's intel, which he could make obsolete by moving them. When Minjay returned, she was sitting with the twins. I'm not taking the deal, she said. He nodded slowly. Then we move. Now. There's a safe house in the industrial district. We can stay there until I arrange new transport. They packed in silence. The note sat in Stacy's pocket. Insurance. Protection. An escape plan if everything went wrong. She told herself it wasn't betrayal, just survival. The new safe house was a converted warehouse loft, bare concrete, industrial lighting, somewhere between the shipping yards and the rail lines. 22 hours had passed since the first red laser dot. The twins had cried themselves to exhaustion hours ago, their small bodies finally surrendering to sleep on a makeshift bed Minjay's people had prepared. He hadn't spoken to her in hours, not since they'd arrived, just moved through the space with mechanical precision, checking security, monitoring feeds, his face a mask. Stacy sat on the floor, her back against the wall, watching him work, wondering when everything had gone so wrong, wondering if it had ever been right. The feds raided the first bunker, Minjay said suddenly, not turning around. 30 minutes after we left. Found nothing. Your file deletion worked perfectly. Minjay. Cho's widow called again. His voice was flat. She wanted to know if her husband's death bought us anything, if his sacrifice mattered. I told her yes. I lied again. I was trying to help. He pulled something from his pocket, unfolded it, her handwriting visible even from across the room. The note. Stacy's blood went cold. "I found it when we were packing," Minjay said, his voice eerily calm. "Fell out of your pocket. At first I thought it was a shopping list. Then I read it. Backup location if compromised. 47.7128 degrees north, 122.4598 degrees west. That's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." He looked at her now, and his eyes were empty. "An escape plan. Coordinates to my safe house. My access codes. Everything the feds would need to find me if you decided to take their deal after all. I was protecting the twins. By preparing to sell me out." His laugh was broken. "You deleted my files to cover your tracks. Made it look like you were helping. Then wrote down my location as insurance in case you changed your mind. I wasn't going to use it." "Then why write it?" He moved closer. "Why document it? Why keep it in your pocket like a loaded gun?" "Because I don't know if I can trust you." The words exploded out of her. "You stalked us for 6 months. You're marrying someone else in 3 months. You've lied about everything. So yes, I wrote down an escape plan because I don't know if staying with you means protection or prison. At least you're honest now." Minjay's voice was ice. "You've been calculating exit strategies since the moment we got back together. Survival at my expense. I understand that. But don't pretend it's about the twins. It's about you. About making sure you have options while I burn my entire world down to keep you safe. You're not keeping me safe. You're keeping me controlled. And you're keeping me as a resource until something better comes along. We're both using each other, Stacy. The difference is I'm not pretending otherwise." He walked to the far side of the loft, putting maximum distance between them. "We stay here until I can arrange transport," he said without turning around. "After that, you can go wherever you want. Take the twins. Take my coordinates. Take whatever you need, but you don't get to explain. You made your choice when you wrote that note. I deleted your files. As cover, so when you eventually hand me over, you can say you tried to protect me first. Perfect strategy. I'd applaud if I wasn't the target." Stacy stood, the note crumpled in her fist. "You're wrong. Am I? Then burn it, right now. Prove you weren't planning an exit." She looked at the paper, at the insurance policy she'd written, at the proof that some part of her was still calculating, still planning, still preparing to run. She couldn't burn it, and Minjay saw that, saw her hesitation. "That's what I thought," he said quietly. Then he turned his back on her and didn't speak again. The explosion came 30 hours after the first attack. Stacy had been reading to the twins, the brave mouse story, their favorite, her voice soft and soothing despite the tension crackling through the warehouse loft. Mara was curled against her left side, Clara against her right, both of them finally calm after hours of tears and questions she couldn't answer. The door blew inward. Not opened, not kicked, blown, explosive breach, military grade. The concussive force picked Stacy up and threw her against the concrete wall like a child's doll. Her shoulder hit first, then her head, a crack that made stars explode across her vision. Her ears rang, high-pitched and constant. The twins were screaming, but she couldn't hear them through the ringing. Smoke poured through the breach. Thick, acrid, chemical. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Through the haze, shapes moved. Men, 6, 8, more, tactical gear, helmets, night vision, professional equipment that made the Seo clan look like amateurs. Minjay was already in motion, gun drawn, firing with controlled precision. 2 shots. 2 men dropped, their bodies hitting concrete with wet, final sounds. But there were more. So many more. They swarmed him like wolves taking down a deer. Coordinated, brutal, efficient. One man came low while another came high. A knee drove into Minjay's stomach, folding him forward. Hands grabbed his gun arm, twisting, forcing the weapon away. It clattered across concrete, skittering into smoke. Minjay fought like the monster he'd always been. Elbow to someone's face, crack of bone, spray of blood. Headbutt to another, more blood. But they were professionals too. More of them, better equipped. Zip ties appeared. Industrial strength. They yanked his arms behind his back, the plastic cutting into his wrists as they tightened with brutal efficiency. "Stacy." His voice was raw, desperate, all the ice melting into pure panic. "The twins. Get the..." Someone grabbed Stacy from behind. Iron grip. Professional hold. Immobilizing. A hand clamped over her mouth before she could scream, cutting off air, making black spots dance at the edges of her vision. She tried to fight, drove her elbow back, hit body armor, might as well have hit a wall, tried to stomp on his foot. He shifted his weight, avoiding it easily. She was nothing. A civilian fighting a trained operator. Useless. Through the smoke, she saw them. 2 men approaching the twins. Professional, calm, moving with deliberate care. Mara and Clara clung to each other on the floor where the explosion had thrown them, crying, their small faces pale with absolute terror. Their mouths were open in screams. Stacy still couldn't fully hear through the ringing. One of the contractors knelt down, his movements slow, non-threatening. He said something in Korean, his voice gentle despite the violence around them. Mara shook her head, crying harder. Clara buried her face in her sister's shoulder. The contractor tried again, softer this time. He pulled something from his pocket, a small stuffed rabbit, identical to the one Mara had lost weeks ago. Her eyes went wide. He offered it to her. Stacy's heart shattered. He'd researched them, known their favorite toys, come prepared to manipulate traumatized children. Slowly, carefully, the contractor lifted both girls together. One arm under Mara, one under Clara, keeping them together, their small bodies pressed against each other as they sobbed. No! Minjay was fighting against the zip ties with inhuman strength, blood streaming from his nose, his lips split, his voice breaking into something primal and desperate. No! Stacy! The girls! Please! More contractors swarmed him, forcing him down. Zip ties on his ankles now, making him helpless. One man knelt on his back, driving his face into the concrete. Stacy was being dragged backward, away from her daughters, away from Minjay screaming her name like a prayer and a curse. A woman stepped through the smoke. Lee Sun-young, perfect, composed. Immaculate black suit somehow untouched by smoke or chaos. She surveyed the scene with the detached interest of someone observing a chess game, her pieces moving exactly as planned. "You calculated this beautifully, Miss Woods," she said, her voice cutting through the noise with eerie calm. She had to raise her voice slightly to be heard over the ringing alarms and Minjay's desperate struggling, but her tone remained conversational, almost pleasant. "Turning my son against you just enough to keep him distracted. Buying time with your little computer performance. The FBI was an excellent misdirection." "I didn't," Stacy tried to speak, but the hand over her mouth tightened, cutting off words. "Oh, I know. You weren't working with me. You had no idea I was positioning my pieces." Lee Sun-young stepped closer, studying Stacy like a specimen under glass. "But your actions served my purposes nonetheless. Your pride, your secrets, your inability to trust. You kept my son so focused on whether you'd betray him that he forgot to watch for the knife I was preparing." She turned to look at Minjay, still struggling against impossible restraints, blood on his face, desperation in his eyes. "Pride and secrets, Miss Woods." Lee Sun-young's smile was cold. "They cost everyone everything." The contractor holding Stacy started dragging her toward the blown exit. She could see outside now. 2 black SUVs idling, engines running, professional extraction vehicles. She saw the contractor carrying both twins together. At least they were together. At least that their small faces pressed against each other as they screamed for Mama, for Daddy, for someone to make this stop. "Stacy," Minjay's voice cracked completely, breaking into something that sounded like it was tearing him apart from the inside. "Please, the girls, save the girls, Stacy." The contractor carrying the twins walked toward the first SUV, opened the door, carefully, gently, placed them in the back seat, still together, still holding each other, then closed the door with a soft click that somehow felt louder than the explosion. Stacy could see them through the tinted window, 2 small shapes. Mara's face pressed against the glass, her mouth forming one word over and over. "Mama, Mama, Mama." "Stacy!" Minjay was still screaming, still fighting, blood on the concrete now from where they'd ground his face into it. "Please, don't let them take." One of the contractors hit him. Hard. Professionally. The kind of blow designed to stun without causing permanent damage. Minjay's head snapped to the side. His eyes went unfocused for a second, then cleared. Locked on Stacy, pure devastation in them. The last thing she saw before the contractor shoved her into the second SUV, Minjay on his knees, bound and bleeding, his mother standing over him with victory carved into every line of her face, and her daughter's vehicle pulling away. driving into darkness, taking them somewhere she couldn't follow. Then she was in her own SUV, zip ties biting into her wrists, tape across her mouth, and the world was ending. The vehicle smelled like gun oil and leather. Professional, clean. 2 contractors sat across from her, faces obscured by tactical masks. They'd removed their helmets. She could see their eyes, bored. This was just a job to them. Neither spoke for several minutes. The SUV drove smoothly through industrial streets. No sirens, no pursuit. Clean extraction. One contractor's phone buzzed. He answered. Korean conversation. Then, switching to English for her benefit, or maybe just for his partner's, change of plans. The grandmother wants the woman held separately. Not killed. Held. Why? The other man asked. His English accented but clear. Insurance. The father cooperates if she's alive. The children are leverage for the merger. The woman is leverage for the father. They were all pieces. All of them. Arranged on Lee Sun-young's board, moved at her pleasure, sacrificed when convenient. The SUV pulled into an abandoned warehouse 20 minutes later. Industrial district. The kind of place where screams didn't matter and bodies disappeared easily. They hauled Stacy out, cut her ankle restraints so she could walk, kept her wrists bound, led her through a maze of corridors, left, right, straight, another left. She tried to memorize the route, but lost track after the 3rd turn until they reached a small room. Cot, bucket, single bulb hanging from the ceiling. No windows. The door was reinforced steel. You stay. You don't make noise. You don't try to escape. Understand? Stacy nodded. Good. The contractor who'd spoken pulled off his mask. Korean, 30s, professional face. No emotion. Food twice daily. Bathroom once daily. Supervised. No communication with anyone. The grandmother will speak with you when she's ready. The door closed. Lock engaged. Heavy. Final. Alone. Stacy sank onto the cot. Her body felt numb. Her mind couldn't process what had just happened. It kept circling back to the same images. Mara's face pressed against the glass. Minjay screaming her name. The twins being carried away in a stranger's arms. Hours passed. Maybe. Time felt meaningless in the windowless room with its unchanging light. She thought about the note in her pocket. The escape plan Minjay had found. The moment she'd chosen strategy over faith. Survival over partnership. He'd been right. She hadn't chosen him. She'd been trying to survive him. And now they were both paying the price. There was a quote from her architecture professor, something he'd said when a student's ambitious design had collapsed during structural testing. Pride makes us build higher than our materials can support. Humility teaches us to build deeper first. She'd built tall, built fast, built beautiful, but she'd built without a foundation, without trust, without the deep structural support that made buildings last. And when pressure came, everything had collapsed. The door opened. Stacy's head snapped up. How long had she been sitting there? An hour? 6 hours? She had no idea. Lee Sun-young walked in, holding a tablet, looking as fresh and composed as if she'd just come from a spa instead of coordinating a military assault. She studied Stacy with cool assessment. My son is secured in a separate facility, she said without preamble. Alive, unharmed beyond superficial injuries. The twins are at my estate, together, being cared for by my staff. They've been bathed, fed, put to bed in a beautiful nursery. They cried for you for approximately 40 minutes before exhaustion took over. Children are resilient. They'll adapt. The casual cruelty of it made Stacy's stomach turn. You are exactly where I need you, Miss Woods. What do you want? I want my family's legacy protected. I want my son married to Park Ji-won as contracted. I want my granddaughters raised properly. Korean language, Korean culture, Korean values. I want the Lee Empire secured for another generation. She tapped the tablet. Video appeared. Minjay in another room, also bound to a chair, his face showing the damage from the fight. His eyes were empty, defeated. Look at him. Look at what loving you cost. His empire crumbling, his protection compromised, his children taken, all because he couldn't let you go, all because he chose obsession over duty. Stacy looked, saw the man she'd loved breaking apart on screen. I'm going to make you an offer, Lee Sun-young continued, her voice businesslike. You will testify that my son kidnapped you and the children, that he held you against your will, that you feared for your safety. This testimony will help me secure permanent custody through the court's clean, legal, uncontestable. And in exchange? Supervised visitation, 1 weekend per month. You'll see your daughters. They'll know you exist, but they'll be raised properly. They'll want for nothing. They'll have the best education, the best opportunities, the best future. They'll have everything except their mother. They'll have everything that matters. Lee Sun-young's smile was sharp. You can hate me if you wish, but ask yourself, what can you give them? Poverty? Instability? A mother in hiding from the law? Or would you prefer they grow up in privilege, in safety, with only a small sacrifice that you're not the primary force in their lives? And if I refuse, then you disappear, completely. The children will be told you abandoned them. Minjay will be told you took a deal with federal prosecutors to save yourself. Everyone loses except my family. We still get the twins. We still get the marriage. You simply cease to matter. You've planned everything. I always do. That's why I win. She stood, smoothing her suit. You have 6 hours to decide, Miss Woods. I suggest you choose wisely. It's the last choice you'll get to make regarding your daughters. The door closed. Locked, Stacy sat in the silence, her mind racing. Somewhere in this city, Mara and Clara were sleeping in a strange bed, in a strange house, being told lies about their mother. Minjay was in another room, bound and helpless, probably being told she'd betrayed him. Everything they'd tried to build the fragile trust, the tentative hope shattered. She'd been right to write the note, right to protect herself, right not to trust him completely, and being right had cost her everything. In the distance, barely audible through steel and concrete, she heard something. A child crying, high-pitched, desperate. Stacy's head snapped up. She knew that cry, would know it anywhere. Mara. Her daughter was somewhere in this building, close enough to hear, too far to reach. The foundation wasn't just cracked. It was leveled, demolished, reduced to rubble, but Stacy wasn't done fighting. She looked at her bound wrists, at the reinforced door, at the impossible situation Lee Sun-young had constructed with such careful precision. 6 hours to decide, 6 hours to figure out how to survive this, 6 hours to find a way back to her daughters. The shadows were just getting started. But so was she. The foundation hasn't just cracked, it's been leveled. If you're screaming at your screen right now, if you need to know how Stacy and Minjay claw their way back from this disaster, you're ready for the finale. Have you ever had to choose between pride and partnership? Between protecting yourself and trusting someone who's already hurt you? That's the knife edge Stacy walked, and it cost her everything. This is Velvet Noir. We tell stories that leave marks. Subscribe and drop part 3 in the comments if you want to see Stacy and Minjay burn the world down to get their daughters back, because the end isn't the end. It's just the beginning of war. Stay with us. The shadows are just getting started.